Today on the Kristen Supercrit Malefchuk Show, I'll be interviewing John Biggan, who is running for City Council in Hurst, Texas. John is a neuroscientist and has nonprofit experience working at organizations that service children who are in foster care or receiving adoption services, and he spent many years researching healthy aging for senior citizens. Stay tuned for this exciting episode and learn all about John and why he's running for City Council in Hurst, Texas. Welcome back, everybody. I am here with John Biggan, and we're going to be talking to him a little bit today about why he's running for Hurst City Council. And John, I'd like to start by just asking you a little bit about your background, where you grew up. Have you been living in Texas your whole life in the Hurst area, or are you from elsewhere? And how did you come to be where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So my family, or at least a portion of my family, has been here for 6 generations, been in Texas, more in central Texas. So if you don't know Texas, it's very, very large. There are lots of different regions and they have very different feels to them. But I was born in San Antonio, which is a little ways south of here. Lived in Austin for a little while when I was much, much younger, and then spent most of my childhood in El Paso. So I was out, as far west as you can possibly go, out in the desert in the mountains there. When I turned 18, I decided to come out to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, which is where I'm at now. That's where Hurst is. And I went to the University of Texas at Arlington. I ended up getting a bachelor's there, and then I liked it so much I stuck around and I got a master's, and then I got a PhD there as well. I've also lived, I did what's called a postdoc. So it's kind of an internship after a PhD. Did that up in Illinois. So I spent a little bit of time in the Midwest, learned about snow and all the wonders that are the Midwest, deep dish pizza and everything else that is out there. So, and then a few years ago, after I was finishing that, that was 2016 was about the time that I was finishing. So 2016, 2017. And there's a lot going on. And in October of 2016, my wife and I, we made a little bit of a mistake, an error in judgment. And we things were happier in October of 2016 for anybody who doesn't remember. That was a good time. November, not so much, but October was great. And in October, we got a little excited and we requested tickets to the inauguration. And we ended up getting them. And so we had to kind of make this decision, and we ended up going. We went to the inauguration, which was very awkward, and then but we did have lots of room to move around, so that part was nice. The next day, though, the next day we went to the Women's March, and that we did not have so much room. We were packed in there. But it was this wonderful experience, and we got to see, a whole lot of people who I think had sat on the sidelines for a long time and finally realized that, look, if things are going to change, if things are going to get better, I've got to do something about it. And so that kind of started, thinking, and my wife and I were talking later that night, and we talked about, I'd always been kind of interested in politics, but my background's in neuroscience, so, I was off doing lab work there. And at that time she said, have you ever thought about running for office? And so we discussed that a little bit more over the coming months. And ultimately I decided to leave the lab, and we moved back to Texas from Illinois. And yeah, I left the lab and decided to, at that point, I ran for Congress. And, this is without any political background or anything like that. And I went up against somebody who had been the nominee the year before in the primary and came in second. So I didn't make it through there. Long story short, most recently there was, the reason why I ran was to try and make an impact, to make a difference in my community.
Yeah.
And so I knew that, there were certainly things that could be done at the federal level. There's also things at the local level. And I had considered, when I first ran for Congress, I thought about running for city council or something like that. But at the time, it just didn't make sense. Now, fast forward a few years, there's an opening on the city council. There's a person who's been there for 20 years and is not going to run again. And a lot of the things that I'd been pushing for in my congressional run needed somebody at the local level to implement them. So you needed something federally to happen with funding, but then it had to actually be implemented here. So now I see a great opportunity to get in there at the local level and hopefully, improve things around here.
And you just totally tied into one of my questions. It was going to be the next question after the one I was going to ask, but I'm just going to ask it now because you just brought it up. I think that, especially with all the interactions on social media, on Twitter, where a lot of the talks is politics, we're more familiar with what's going on at the federal level. And I think people hear a lot that local government is important, but I think a lot of people are still a little bit oblivious to how local government impacts their life. I was wondering if you could give some maybe kind of a specific example to your community and how local government and what your position would do if you were to have a seat on the city council, how that could impact the lives of the constituents in your community.
Yeah, so I mean, local government affects all those little daily things that are going on, from making sure that the potholes are filled and the water is on, which that was kind of a big deal a few weeks ago here in Texas, about making sure that utilities were functioning well. We have municipal water, so that, of course, unfortunately in Hurst, we did pretty well for the most part. There were certainly people with burst pipes and people without power for quite some time, but we seemed to fare a little bit better than some of the surrounding communities. So it's things like that. It's things like working with the local community college. So if you need a certificate, or you want to go for an associate's, or you want to get your basics out of the way, part of that is overseen by a board that oversees the community college, but part of it is also working with those local governments. And the reason why I bring this up is because I've taught there's a community college here in Hurst, Tarrant County College. It's a fantastic place, really pretty campus. And I taught there for many, many years.
Right.
And one of the things that I saw was that I had a lot of students who had kids, and trying to juggle school and kids and find money for childcare is a real challenge. In fact, my students at TCC spend more on childcare in a semester than they do on tuition and books combined.
Yeah.
And that's a huge problem. But there is a solution to that. And the solution is working with groups like Early Head Start and Head Start. There's funding there at the federal level. Mm-hmm. We can work with the city, with local nonprofits, and with the federal government to get those grants in order to expand on-campus childcare there at the community college, which will cut in half people's costs. And then if they've got Pell Grants, or they've got anything else, or if I know one of Biden's big pushes is to make community college more affordable. Say we start bringing you down there. Now community college is incredibly affordable. People can get those certificates, they can get the associate's degree, they can get their basics, whatever they need to do.
Very nice. Yeah, and so, and the way I'm hearing that is not just the role of local government in and of itself, but as a link between the federal government and the local community, and how the go-between is so important to be able to get the resources that you need.
Completely, yeah. Yep, 100%.
And I know that you just mentioned, because I noticed that you had been a professor for your on your website. But I wondered, besides the, being a neuroscientist, like, so most people hear that and they're like, what does that even entail? And it's kind of funny because I have a neuromuscular condition. That's why I'm in a wheelchair.
Okay.
So I know you probably know all kinds of biological stuff that most people couldn't even understand. But what I'm wondering is the neuroscientist experience, the working in a nonprofit,
Hmm.
and you've both worked with or worked around people that are aging and the younger population and adoption and foster care services. How does all of this experience, if you could kind of dive into that a little bit, tie into how it would impact your ability to serve well in the city council?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and I get asked that all the time. Okay, so what does that actually mean? For me, I was to be more specific, I was a cognitive neuroscientist, and although we normally just say neuroscientist because that's as we try and keep it a little basic. What that basically meant was that I was studying how people think, how their brains work, and really more importantly, how for that older population, how we keep them healthy as long as possible. So we keep that brain chugging along as people get older, and also what types of interventions work for kids in order to help them to develop as well as they possibly can, both physically and mentally at the same time. And I also worked with people of basically all age ranges, and worked with a couple of different medical populations and children with dyslexia and those sorts of things as well. And so a lot of it was just kind of merging psychology and those kinds of things that we think about just thought processes and memory and learning and those with biology. And so trying to then couple those two together and figure out, okay, so what's actually happening here? What are the biological processes that are helping these older adults to keep their brain in a good place? And how can we make sure that we can get other people to that same place? So I did a lot of that. The way that I think my background ends up helping at the local level is that, just broadly speaking, people who come from a science background, from a research background, they have years and years of experience answering questions, right? Answering difficult questions, I should say, because that's really all the scientific process is. It's not a belief system. It's just a way, it's a tool in order to answer a question. So when you think, how do we make sure that housing is affordable? Or how do we help people to transition out of homelessness? Or how do we make sure that people are prepared for the job market and that businesses have the resources that they need in order to thrive? Well, what I come back to is I look at the data. So I ask that same question and I say, okay, so let's, we have maybe competing hypotheses, which is what happens a lot, especially between, team blue and team red. We have these competing hypotheses, and one side says, no, this is the only way. This is how we fix this. And the other one says, no, this is, but nobody ever says, okay, so let's find out. let's test this out and see what's going to happen.
Yeah, try and true, right?
And so, and that's what I've done. I've done in business settings, as well as in nonprofit settings, as well as in university settings. And so I think having that background on a city council can be very, very helpful. Also, my background, of course, with aging, we have our population in general is aging. So in Hurst here, about 16% of our population is over the age of 65. That is up quite a bit from years past. And what that means is that we need to look at that population. We really need to spend some time and energy on that population to make sure they can thrive, because if they thrive, then they stay healthier. So healthcare costs go down, ambulance rides go down, but also they're able to get out into the community and participate in things and live good lives. And also for businesses, if they're out and about and they don't have to spend as much money on medical care, they have money that they can now spend at your business. So those are kind of some of the things that I think of when I think of what my role would be on the council.
Excellent. And I always end up tying in a little bit of my personal agenda and my background into things somewhere, and you just kind of did it for me, because when it comes to the senior population, it relates very much to a lot of the stuff that the disability community deals with. And you were talking about like staying active in the community, living longer lives, more productive lives. It really depends on staying active, and that's a big issue that I advocate about. Is the longer people are able to stay in their own homes and receive some sort of community-based care, the happier, longer lives that they're going to live, and the more productive they're going to be. The more.
And typically, the less it ends up costing.
Yeah.
That's so for a while. With my science background, I have a data background as well. So a lot of time with data. For a while, I actually worked for a Fortune 100 company as a senior analyst, and my job, this was an insurance company. So it's the largest Medicare Advantage provider or insurer in the country. You're probably familiar with Humana. So I was a senior analyst for them for a while. And my job, I had a really cool job. It was my job to go out and find new offerings for our members that would help them to be healthier. So we would offer, of course, this wasn't pushed on anybody, but they had the opportunity to have this new service or whatever that particular product was. We added that on, and then we tried to see if, okay, so does that help them to be healthier, but also does that save us money at the same time? Can it be a win-win? And typically, yeah. It depends a little bit on what it is specifically. The number one place to save money, really, by improving treatment is diabetes. There are huge cost savings to helping people manage their diabetes. That
I'm diabetic too, so.
Okay, so you understand, yeah. The more and more we can help people to manage those types of things and to stay healthy and to be active and part of the community, it's not just morally the right thing to do, even though it is morally the right thing to do. It's also generally financially the appropriate way to go. We're already paying for a lot of this stuff. We would save ourselves so much money, and we would have happier communities if we would invest.
Isn't it incredible too? Because we always say, like, wouldn't it be nice if everybody was just like, let's just do this because it's the morally right thing to do? How often the morally right thing to do is also the cheaper thing to do.
Yep.
How often that coincides when you really look at it, because big business industries with lobbyists and so forth, they tend to not necessarily care as much about the morally right thing to do. So
maybe focused on the short-term gain instead of the long-term. Yeah.
Yeah. So going on to the next question, I wanted to know about your specific goals if you were to get a seat on the city council. What are some of the issues, some of the policies that you would like to communicate with people in your area about, like, how is this going to maybe impact their lives personally?
Yeah. So a couple of things that we want to do. Right now, the focus really is on COVID, just because it impacts everything. It impacts schooling, it impacts businesses, it impacts just everything is impacted by COVID. So we've got to get that under control. One of the things that we can do from the city side is to make sure that our first responders have the PPE that they need. So that is one of the simplest things that we can do. The next thing is, and the city has done a great job about this so far, is we need to do everything we can to work with the county, the state, federal government in order to get people vaccinated as quickly as possible. And the city has actually opened up our convention center here. It's one of the it's one of the big places in the county to get a vaccination. And so we've made it quick, easy in order to get residents vaccinated as quickly as possible, which is one of the best things we can do, to get everything back to as close to normal as possible. On top of that, as we kind of move forward after that, what we need to start considering are Um, how do we work with and invest in the local businesses in order to prep them going forward?
Yeah.
One of the questions for a lot of consumers is, am I going to be safe going into this business? Right. So, and that might have to do with mask policy or whatever else. But what we know about this particular virus is it's airborne. And one of the best things that we could be doing right now, and it has been done in a few places, Dallas Fort Worth International Airport, which is about 15 minutes from here, they have implemented improved air filtration and disinfecting in the terminals. Why? Because again, it's good for business. You're investing, but you're keeping people healthier. You're making sure that people feel comfortable, or more comfortable at least, coming in and spending their money in that location. We
Right.
can work with some of these businesses that have been hard hit, maybe through tax incentives or something of the like, in order to improve their air filtration. It's
Mm-hmm.
good for them. It's good for their customers. It's good for the public health here in the city. But it also means that they're going to be selling a whole lot more, and we get tax revenue off of that in order to provide more and more services. So it's again a win-win for everybody. Um, one other big thing, I've got a couple that I want to, I've got a number of plans here, but one other big one was that one that I talked about at the community college about expanding on-campus childcare, and that's something that I'm passionate about because I've taught there, but I've also been the chief operating officer of a nonprofit in this county that provides on-campus childcare at the University of Texas at Arlington, which is about a 15-minute drive south of here. And they did it exactly the way that I mentioned. They used early Head Start dollars, they used nonprofit dollars, and then they worked with, in that case, the city of Arlington. But we can do the same thing here in the city of Hurst, and maybe with some of the surrounding cities, kind of all pitching in to help our citizens get the education they need and make sure that those businesses have a well-trained workforce so that everybody thrives.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, and from a science position, I'm wondering. I mean, I work with the Perth Transit organization as well. And I know we've done a lot of talking about how when COVID is over, which is not really over, but once people feel like it's over with,
Mhm.
is it necessarily going to shift back to normal, or are things forever going to be changed? And you were talking about some things that we've been talking about as well. Like, are we going to start looking at everything a little bit differently as far as protection and all of that goes? And because one of the things, it was a group of students from, I believe, a community college that came up with a design for a self-cleaning bus.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, and it's very, very cool in New York. But I was just wondering what your thoughts were as far as moving ahead from all of this. Do you see the long term changing forever, or do you think things will kind of go back to normal, or
That is an excellent question, and I wish I had a good answer for it. But I'm glad that you brought up the.
getting off the course of like your normal questions here? So sorry about that, but
No, not at all. No, and I'm not a virologist. Certainly, I know a few, but I hope that we can get back to at least a semi-normal. I think ultimately society is going to push us toward getting back to normal. So that's why I think it's so important to get everybody vaccinated as quickly as possible. The sooner we do it, the fewer mutations there's going to be, the more effective it's going to be, the better chance we have of completely getting rid of this thing. Um, Now, as far as public transit goes, I'm glad that you brought that up. I've been thinking about that a lot. So the city of Hurst does not have public transit. Many of the cities in this area, Texas is very, very spread out. It's getting denser, but it's been spread out for so long that we don't have a whole lot. The On the Dallas side of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, which we're kind of right in the middle of it. So we're a little bit more on the Fort Worth side.
okay.
The Dallas side has a decent rail system. They've been expanding that for about 25 years now, and they just continue to build. I used to take it to work, in fact. And we do have a rail that actually connects Dallas and Fort Worth. It's about a half a mile from where I live. So I walk over there sometimes, take it over to Mavs games when we could do that, or to downtown Fort Worth, and it's fantastic. I love public transit. Um,
Thank
yeah, it's so relaxing. It,
you.
it's great, and and it's safer for everybody involved. I mentioned going to a Mavs game or a Stars game or anything that's over there. Well, if you have a drink and then you walk back onto the train and the train takes you and you walk it's a lot safer than, okay, now we're all going to get in our cars and good luck everybody.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, so in
It's an equalizer, economic rise. It's got so many benefits. It really does.
it really does. And even for the people who aren't using it, it takes other people off the road, so
Yeah.
now their commute is easier. And yeah, so I'm totally on board on how do we expand public transit. And we've had this discussion in Hurst. There's been a little bit of movement in Arlington, which is a little south of here, it's one of the largest cities that didn't have public transit for a long time, and they've found kind of a middle ground. So maybe building on that. But I think as we go forward, that's a big question that I've got is, how do we do this? And if we're going to put a whole bunch of people together, how do we do it as safely as possible? And maybe that's improving air filtration. We do know from the evidence that's out that airplanes, for example, which have HEPA filters and have really intense filtration, do a pretty good job of keeping people safe. Is it going to keep you safe with the person right next to you? Maybe not, but overall, there's a huge benefit to that type of filtration. And yeah, maybe as we start to expand public transit or get people back onto public transit, we need to look at investing into those types of things.
Nice. Nice. Environmental benefits too. Lots of benefits.
Yes. As an asthmatic, I love cleaner air. So
Absolutely.
yep.
Okay, wonderful. And I also wanted to ask, because this came up on Twitter momentarily, and I figure you're probably gonna have it more. I know that you're looking for campaigning to be able to raise as much funds as possible. Totally understandable. As far as donations from the larger community go, I know that you've explained it before on Twitter, but while we're on recording, I wondered if you could kind of explain this to the larger audience that might be watching.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you brought that up. Campaign finance is one of those sticky areas that I don't think there are any good answers for at the moment. When I ran for Congress, you've got to raise just tons and ungodly amounts of money. And what that typically means is that you spend, there was a point where I was spending 30 to 40 hours a week on the phone doing what's called dialing for dollars. And so you're calling random people and saying, here's who I am, here's what I'm trying to do, and can you give me, $2,000? It's a very unpleasant experience. I am fortunate running for city council, and that's one of the reasons why I was glad to get back in the ring at this point. It doesn't take nearly as much money, and so we can collect from a larger pool of smaller donors, which I really prefer. And don't get me wrong, I've had people who maxed out donations at the federal level, never asked for a thing, and I would have never given them anything. But it's still an uncomfortable place to be. Whereas in this campaign, our largest donation so far has been $250.
Okay.
And we are going to have plenty of money in order to get our message out to the people that we need to get it to.
Good.
And so that is one of the nice things about running at the local level, is that you really can run on a shoestring budget a little bit more than you can at the federal level. Federal level needs a whole lot of work. Maybe some public financing would help. The limits are already there, and so those aren't too bad. But yeah, there really needs to be some work in order to allow candidates to spend less time fundraising and more time doing something for their constituents.
Right.
I think that's the biggest issue that I really see with the way that most campaign finance has gone. Now, what can we do at the moment? And this is a little bit self-serving, but what I've tried to do myself is to say, so if the problem is that we're making these candidates get out there and ask for money and ask for money and ask for money and go to big donors all the time and everything. Then the best thing I can do is to, when I see a candidate that I like, before they call me, go ahead and donate what I can at that moment. Or maybe a little bit, and then maybe a little bit later as I see things going. Because the more of us that kind of do this on our own, the less money they have to ask for from big donors and the less time they have to spend on those phone calls. So I kind of look at it as buying our time back.
Competition, it always does. And I think that some people don't understand how expensive it is to campaign and make your name seen and known and what you're trying to accomplish seen and known. So yeah. Well, that was excellent, and I am running out of time because I was notified by Zoom that it's going to end our meeting in 10 minutes while we were talking about that. So I'm not sure what's going on. They're making me upgrade my plan here. But I'm going to conclude, and if we could maybe like condense this answer a little bit, but if there was one thing, like let's try to make it like a sentence long answer, one thing that you could tell everybody about you, but that not that many people know about you, what would you want people to know about you that maybe many people don't know?
Oh, that is an excellent question. Man, something that people don't know about me. I love to water ski.
We don't need a secret.
Okay.
Just maybe a handful of people.
Yeah, sure. I think the thing that people are least likely to know about me is really the nonprofit work that I do right now. So I work for a wonderful nonprofit group that helps children who are going through foster care and adoption. And I'm trying to, like I said before, use data in order to improve the processes that we bring into that system. So I think I can do the same thing at the city council level. Yeah. Use data, use evidence to just make people's lives better.
Very nice, very nice. Well, thank you so much for being here with me, and I really hope to push this video out there. I hope we get it out to as many of the people in your community as possible. So we'll have to share. I'm going to make sure my viewers share as much as possible. So thank you again, and we're going to be reading for you. What day is the election? It's May 1st, right?
It's last day to vote is May 1st. First day to vote is April 19th. So yeah, it's coming up fast.
All right. So we got to get on this, right?
Yep.
Sure, right. All right. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Mine too. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.